Hey everybody, this is John Bruni, and we have an incredible and informative guest with us today. Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson is a world-renowned expert in sports medicine, exercise physiology, and training for sport performance. He is a world-renowned expert in blood flow restriction training. Dr. Jim, as one of the world's leading physiologists, has identified the key mechanisms, applications, and safety guidelines of BFR training, and then applied them by developing the Be Strong system. He also lectures throughout Europe and North America for those seeking protocols and guidelines to maximize benefits and eliminate the risks of BFR training. As a physician, Dr. Jim has treated thousands of patients and athletes alike. As a researcher, he authored the groundbreaking study, Live High and Train Low, that revolutionized altitude training. And I know everybody's heard about altitude training. As a sports scientist, he has worked with elite level teams in skiing, cycling, running, soccer, and many others. Dr. Stray-Gunderson has been involved in training regimens of Olympians and world-class athletes, resulting, get this folks, in over 100 Olympic medals and world championships. With over 40 years of hands-on experience with people and athletes of all ages, Dr. Stray-Gunderson has constantly been at the forefront of top-level performance. And we could go on and on, folks, but I just want to tell you, prepare yourself, strap yourself in for a fantastic, fantastic interview today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson.
Well, thank you, John. That was a very nice introduction.
We're so excited to have you on today and would love it if you could just share with us how your journey began into sports science and elite human performance. How did this whole thing start?
Oh, wow. um, well, when I was in school, high school, or even grade school, I really didn't care that. The only real things I cared about were science and sports. And and my mother made me get good grades, otherwise she wouldn't let me play my sports. So I had to do something there. And then as I went to college, I still continued to do both. Uh, but as that Moneyball line, there comes a time when everybody's got to move on from their sport to something else, do something else in life. And so I went to med school and did a surgical residency and did some postdoctorate fellowships. But then came the opportunity to bring both sport and medicine or science back to the same thing. And at the time, there really was no sports medicine. This was in the late '70s, and there really were no. I mean, there were orthopedic surgeons who operated on athletes, but there were no sports medicine physicians, and in particular, there was not much research going on in those areas. And instead of behaving myself and being a normal general surgeon, I really started performance medicine or sports medicine in Dallas, Texas. And I was fortunate to get the opportunity to do that by one of my mentors, a Dr. Jerry Mitchell. And we ended up forming a very effective group of athletes, and scientist athletes, including Peter Snell, who has about 5 gold medals and a bunch of world records in middle distance running. And there are some other people involved, less well known, but we had a very comprehensive group of people that were involved in sport at a pretty high level themselves, and involved in science at a pretty high level, and involved in medicine at a pretty high level. And we ended up having a human performance center where we undertook various research projects, and we had a whole series of students and PhDs and doctors who would come through and do various projects. So that's really how it got started. And in my personal case, I had been a middle and long distance runner, and then I had also gotten into cross country ski racing, which are kind of similar things, except one's you do when there's snow on the ground, the other one you don't. Um, but and those things took me to a national level in those sports, and it was around this time where they say, Jim, I don't know that you're really going to make this team as an athlete, but we really like the way you think and what you can bring to the table with your knowledge. So why don't you just kind of be our physician physiologist guy? And that started back in 1984 with the U.S. cross country ski team, and then a similar sort of thing happened with running with Alberto Salazar and the Nike Oregon Project. And so those are the two main first inroads into high level sport. And usually the science I did was revolving around questions the coaches had and what questions the athletes were asking about. And I would, they'd ask me a question and I may not know it. And if I didn't know it, I'd go to the library and see what was there. And then I found out the library didn't know anything either. So then we had to organize a study to find out what the answers were. And that's how a lot of these research programs got started.
And so that's why it's such an honor to talk to you today, because you were really one of the pioneers in the field of sports performance. And it's just, you kind of built, you guys are the ones that built the foundation of what we have today. And so, again, such an honor to speak with you. And speaking of our main topic today, how did you get introduced to blood flow restriction training? How did this concept come across your sports science radar?
Yeah. A good friend and colleague of mine introduced me to it at the American College of Sports Medicine one year. Is probably, maybe 2011. And he said, Jim, you're not going to believe this. There's this device I've been working with. It was Katsu. And he says, I've been working with this device, and we're getting significant hypertrophy and significant improvements in strength in 2 weeks. And I'm going, I think it takes a good 6 weeks to build reasonable muscle. And he says, no, you got to try it. And so I gave it a shot, and I ended up being introduced to Steve Minatonis, who's the American, I guess he's the CEO of Katsu Global. So he's the guy that's running Katsu in the States. And we hit it off, and he came up to the ski team here in Park City and taught me a lot of stuff. And then one thing led to another, and before you know it, I was over in Japan learning from Dr. Sato in the first place. And that was very instructive and very. It's one of those times where you find something that's curious and it's a little bit out of place and doesn't fit into the normal paradigms of how we've been thinking. And then all of a sudden, all sorts of little things start clicking and ideas start lighting up, and that's kind of the exciting part of a science sport performance area, where all of a sudden you're making big leaps and jumps and learning lots and that sort of thing. And so that was great for a while. But then at some point, the Katsu decided that they didn't really want to hire me full time, and I said, "Well, okay, that's all right." And I partnered with my partner Sean Whalen to build what is eventually the Be Strong Band system. And, during my time at Katsu, I also learned that, it was probably too expensive, and there are a number of things that were cumbersome about it, and this and that and the other thing. And so we took a shot at really improving um, a lot of the points that could be improved with Katsu, but also incorporating several of the fundamental principles that Dr. Sato had originally designed into the equipment.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit. How and why did you create the Be Strong system? Because, again, what I love is you're taking this amazing technology and bringing it down so that athletes everywhere, and we'll get even to it, you don't even have to be an athlete, to benefit from this. But can you kind of tell why and why you created the system?
Yeah, it was really out of interest in seeing that everybody could take advantage of it,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a lot of in Japan. The way that Katsu is distributed is there are these little Katsu kiosks, if you will, where there's a Katsu master in there who's learned all the techniques and knows how to do it, and he or she has clients that come in and pay, um, you know, 7,500 yen, something like that, and for a half an hour session, and then they have their 20 clients for the day, and that's how they make their living. That kind of system really wouldn't work here, and um, so in this whole process of um, thinking about how it was that we could get the benefits of elastic blood flow restriction to all the people, we designed something that was affordable and comfortable and easy to use, and all these other sorts of things that go into what we have today.
And there's a lot of misinformation out there about the theory of how blood flow restriction training works. Can you give us kind of this overview theory of why this system is so effective, and really what is the nuts and
Yeah.
bolts behind it?
Yeah. Let me start out with saying a couple things. All exercise and all training is a balance between the damage you do to your body in that training session and the benefit, the adaptation that occurs from that training session. So you kind of got this balance in there, and our standard our training modalities have evolved in a way where we're kind of on that edge where we never really want to have the cost of the session be so much more than the benefit we're getting, that all of a sudden, our performance deteriorates. What we want is to have the benefits just a little bit better than the costs, and over time, performance increases. And the big thing that Be Strong BFR does is that it shifts the balance of that training cost benefit analysis into one where the benefits greatly outweigh the costs. And the way it does that is, now I have to get into a little bit of physiology, but what we do with a Be Strong band, and when we put it on and when we inflate it, we're putting a resistance into the venous outflow circuit. And then what happens is when we do a muscle contraction, the muscles get tense and a little bit bigger, and they squeeze the blood out of the extremity past this venous resistance. And so what's happening here when we're doing exercise with Be Strong bands on is that we're changing the characteristics of the venous outflow out of an extremity. And what that does is that nutrients and oxygen are not delivered in a timely manner to the working muscle. And so if this goes on long enough, then what we say is a disturbance of homeostasis, or you have a metabolic crisis in the working muscle. And a couple things happen with that. That metabolic crisis itself stimulates adaptation. So all sorts of protein synthesis is turned on, and to make more of the things that the muscle cell is running out of. And at the same time, there are nerve endings that are in all of our tissues that are sensing that things are not happy within that muscle at the moment. And so things like the amount of oxygen is going down, the amount of acid is building up, a variety of things are happening. Electrolyte gradients are not quite right. So it predisposes to things like cramping. But essentially, what the general term for all this is we get a disturbance of the homeostasis of those working fibers. And the brain hears about that. And like when you get a sore muscle when you're exercising, that's that muscle telling the brain that things are not all that great. And so the brain tries to fix the situation and does so by stimulating heart rate and increasing breathing, trying to get more blood into these areas that are not getting quite as much blood as they need to carry out the work. And then in addition, there's a hormonal cascade that is released. And this hormonal cascade is meant to heal injuries. It's meant to also stimulate protein synthesis and a variety of other things. So we get this, in essence, we get this natural injection of growth hormone and a variety of other things that really help amplify the local responses that are going on in the muscle that's exercising. So any muscle that's exercising, whether it's below or above the cuff, is now getting this kind of hormonal response that amplifies all the growth processes that are going on in there. And normally you have to do really hard exercise to get that kind of response. But with Be Strong BFR, we found a way to elicit that response with just very otherwise easy exercises. So there's a local response in the working fibers, and then there's what we call a systemic response, which is a neurohumoral autonomic output.
And that's why it makes it so powerful. And I want to talk about the benefits of BFR training in the following areas, and we can kind of break them down one by one. Sure. The benefits to athletic performance, strength, body composition, flexibility, which is a lot of people don't even understand, the great flexibility benefits, anti-aging and hormones, and then the healing of injuries. So if we could kind of start, for the beginning, athletic performance, what are the benefits when it comes to athletic performance?
Well, so on one level, it's been well documented that Be Strong and Katsu BFR increase size of muscles, so muscle hypertrophy, and also increase the strength that can be generated by these things. So an increase in strength is one aspect that is very demonstrable, and it's done with very low levels of work. And if you're lifting standard weights, anywhere around 30% of your 1 rep max is a good place to do BFR work, where the standard work is usually done at 70 or 80% of 1 rep max. And the amount of improvements in strength and hypertrophy are pretty much equal to doing these standard strength regimes. But the problem is you get a lot more damage when you're lifting heavier and heavier weights. Mm-hmm. So, and then another really interesting thing about it is because the weights are manageable, you can go to that last rep where when you're really struggling with 300 pounds over your head, you're wondering where you're going to put this thing and not get hurt. And so you don't take it quite as far to failure as you can with BFR. But so strength is one of the things that's really well established in the literature. Another thing is that there's a breakdown of fat and a building of lean muscle. So your body composition changes where you get more lean muscle or lean body mass, and you get less fat mass from a regular Be Strong BFR program.
Can we go back to the one for a second with athletic performance too? I'm wondering, because I'm sensing this when I've been using this now for years. What about the lactic acid tolerance and endurance factor? Is that something that is a byproduct of training with Be Strong?
Yeah. So one of the things that happens with Be Strong workouts is you get a higher lactate than you otherwise would for that work. And that's because the amount of oxygen getting into that muscle cell is more limited. And so you need to have more anaerobic glycolysis or anaerobic metabolism to supply the ATP to do the work. So that's clear. It's also lactate actually is a marker of this disturbance of homeostasis that we were talking about. So that is part of that picture. And then if I shift around a little, people talk about lactate tolerance intervals or workouts and that kind of thing. And I don't know that they necessarily, it's not that you're running around with high levels of lactate that make you able to do those things better. It's just that you put your body into this position where it's got to do work under these circumstances, and it does get better at doing those. But what it has to do with the particular lactate levels is there's lactate is a marker of it. It's not really the bad guy, if you will.
Yeah, and the reason I asked and wanted to stop there for a second is that I think we get these people locked into ideas about BFR, that it's only for bodybuilders or it's only for power athletes, but it's great for endurance athletes. If you're a runner, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is people don't have to worry they're going to get too big or any of these things. I mean, can you kind of put that to rest that, athletes from no matter what your sport is, that you could benefit from it?
This is important to say. So, I mean, there's many sports where body weight is a penalty. Ski jumping is a good example. Long distance running. One of the nice things about Be Strong is that in the setting of an endurance athlete or a ski jumper or somebody like that, you get improvements in strength, which they need for their sport, but they also, their muscle may get a little bit bigger, but it's not going to turn them into, Arnold or anything. Yeah. And so they do get stronger and they do get leaner, and that's just what they need for their sport. And a lot of this depends on the nutrition that's going along with it. So if you're interested in getting big, then along with doing some standard weightlifting as well as Be Strong lifting, then we recommend that you have at least 2 grams per kilo body weight of protein in your diet. And for those people who are working on getting lean, one of the things about Be Strong is that it basically runs on muscle glycogen and muscle glucose. So carbohydrates are very important. And what you do is you minimize the amount of fats and the amount of protein in the diet. So the nutrition and the workouts go hand in hand to attain the kind of body composition that you're looking for your sport or for whatever reason.
Yeah, I feel like people are getting a master's class today if they're listening close. One of the things I really enjoy about Be Strong personally as a professional strongman is this allows me to, and we'll talk more about this at the end, cycle in heavy and light workloads just for joint protection.
Yeah.
Your joints can't handle crazy weights day in, day out. And then I also tell our people that, I work with that are runners, your joints take such a pounding when you run, all of these things. And so you're getting that. And so, like I said, this is just a perfect thing that you can work into any workout system. Also, can you talk about flexibility for a second? This was something that I came across. I had no idea that it was going to make that much drastic in as far as my mobility. It made a drastic difference, and I wasn't even expecting it. It was kind of like a surprise. Can you explain why that happens to a lot of
Well,
people?
yeah, tell me a little bit more about what happened with you.
Okay, so I started again. I try and cycle my Be Strong training for different things. Sometimes I'll use it as a finisher after a moderately heavy workout. I'll use it as a finisher to make sure I'm getting that pump because, again, if you're just working with heavy weights, you're not getting that muscle exhaustion. You're working a different system of the body and trying to be well rounded. Sometimes I'll use it purely as a warm up to prepare for heavy weights, and as I've used it as a warm up, simple calisthenics, 20 to 30 reps each exercise, going through some joint mobility. Once I take them off, my flexibility, as far as dropping into a squat or a Cossack squat, or
Mhm.
even the partial, not the full splits, it's amazing things that you could never do cold that all of a sudden you can do. It seems like it's almost magic how it occurs.
Well, one of the big things that I think happens is um, that when you're doing even a very light Be Strong workout, you're really getting you're stimulating an increase in blood flow into ligaments and tendons as well as muscle and everything else, and you're also working out a little bit of swelling that may have been there from the previous day or whatever, and so that workout then clears the tendon of this interstitial edema, which makes it more flexible and easier to do things and doesn't hurt as much. And then with the increase in blood flow, you're also revving the system up and getting it going, getting it set to do even harder work. Yeah.
Excellent. And what about the anti-aging and hormone factor? I think this is something
Yeah.
that everybody that's listening, if you're like me, I'm 49 years old and I'm still doing ridiculous, crazy stuff, but it's because of technologies like Be Strong that I'm able to do that. Um, Being a drug-free lifter my entire life, explain how these hormones actually can, help us with anti-aging as well as getting a boost of things that we don't get anymore as we get older.
Well, I like to think of, well, both Live High, Train Low and Be Strong as natural ways of uh, getting some of those things the uh, drug not so free people do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the case of Be Strong, in the case of Live High, Train Low, essentially we figured out a way for the body to secrete its own erythropoietin, which builds up red blood cells, which improves VO2 max, which is what blood doping is. But we do it in a what I consider a physiologic way, where there's still the feedback loops that keep everything safe. Where when you're talking about pharmacological ways of doing it, it's easy to overdo it. Um, and the same thing with Be Strong. And the analogy here is Be Strong is a way of using exercise to stimulate secretion of anabolic hormones like growth hormone, IGF-1, testosterone, all of those things. And you don't have to really do the drugs, and it's a lot less expensive, and it's fail safe because the feedback systems are in place, so you're not going to get the complications. But
Absolutely.
actually, all exercise and all intense exercise stimulates these hormones to be released. It's just that with kind of standard intense exercise, there's only so much of it you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, you're doing damage, and then that hormone release then has to go repair the damage first. Here with Be Strong, we've kind of biohacked that thing where we don't get the damage, so you can go right ahead and start building on top of what you already got right from the get go.
Yeah, because I love the hormone release if you're doing a heavy, high rep squat routine. I mean, you're not be able to walk for days. So that's what I'm trying to tell people is like, there's all these things are a trade off, and I'm trying to tell people is that what we have to start looking at is how do we train smarter, not
Mm-hmm.
always harder because there is diminishing returns. I push my body so many times these 2 and 3 hour workouts day in day out. And then you get to be this, where I'm at now, and it's like you've got all these injuries. And so now as I've learned to train smarter, all those things begin to get healed. I can still do those things, but how you cycle them, just like everything else,
Right.
makes all the difference. And then the last thing about this, you talk about healing of injuries. This is something that I personally have seen, especially with shoulders and hips and knees. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's part of this same balance again. If you put some of our body's parts to rest, which is the reflex with all sorts of injuries, atrophy sets in. The tissues don't. They're not being asked to do anything, so they just kind of go away.
Mhm.
And so, where you have a sprained ankle, okay, we'll rest it, or you broken femur, okay, you can't move, you can't put any weight on your leg. All of these things, there's huge consequences in terms of atrophy and loss of function by not doing anything. On the other hand, if you tried to go play basketball with a broken femur, it wouldn't go very well. And you have to, in the case of fractures, you have to fix them. You have to get them so the pieces of the fracture are not moving relative to one another. And if you tried to do normal exercise, they wouldn't sit still, and you'd end up with what's called a non-union, and the fracture wouldn't heal. So, on the other hand, somewhere in the middle are these easy exercises that don't disturb the healing process, but are enough to remind those parts what they're supposed to be doing. And that's where Be Strong comes in, because not only are we going to get a really good quality workout from the combination of the easy exercises plus the Be Strong, but we're also going to get that systemic response, which is both anabolic to build and repair things, and it also helps to reduce inflammation and everything else. Very common that if someone has a hurt part and it's swollen, you do a Be Strong workout, and all of a sudden the swelling's a lot better, and the thing feels a lot better after you're done. So it's really great in that way, where it kind of rides that fence between doing nothing and doing the normal sorts of training, which would end up just aggravating the injury and not letting it heal.
It's excellent stuff. Um, this is something I really wanted to talk with you about, because this is really important to me, because when I first started doing BFR, it was not with pressure cuffs. It was with tourniquets and knee wraps. I tried all kinds of crazy stuff. I actually one time took what they call those tie downs. I don't even know what they're called, that you use to strap stuff down on the back of a truck. So I've used it all, doing crazy stuff. What makes the Be Strong system different from tourniquets or elastic wraps, and why are air pressured cuffs superior for this type of training?
Yeah, well, there's a couple different comparisons here. One of the first ones is to talk about a rigid system versus an elastic system. Um, Both Katsu and Be Strong are elastic systems, meaning that the outer circumference of the belt expands and is elastic, can expand and contract with what's going on with the muscle underneath it. Um, Things like a blood pressure cuff and surgical tourniquets, they are rigid in that their outer circumference will not change no matter what happens. And so what happens when you have a muscle contract, it shortens, and it also gets fatter or bigger in circumference. And if there's an outside wrapping around that's not giving, then the pressure inside that compartment has no alternative but to just spike and go really high. And that actually damages the muscle itself. It sets up a occluding of the circulation, which has its own set of problems down the line. And on top of that, it just hurts and doesn't feel good. So one of the really unique things about Be Strong is our elasticity, so that when you do a muscle contraction, like flex your elbow, the area that is underneath the band ends up getting bigger, and and the Be Strong band expands with that.
I wanted to share a special offer for all of our listeners today. You can get $75 off your order at Be Strong with code JOHN75. That's JON75 until the end of February. And we're going to get back to our show in just a minute, but I wanted to share a quick word from our sponsors. The Pressing the Limits podcast is brought to you by ZionMissionaryChurch.net. This site is dedicating to helping you grow spiritually. You can listen and watch encouraging messages, and you can even share your prayer requests. And also by NeuroPowerSource.com. These are resources for your mind, your body, and your spirit. You're going to find all the recommended supplements and gear I use, including the Be Strong bands. You'll be sure to want to check it out. Yeah, and it's fantastic because I said it's night and day once people try the difference. But again, I've always said this with these type of things. Again, we're talking about your long-term health. We're talking about your circulatory health. You really get what you pay for. And so, if you want to risk your circulation system to a tourniquet, I guess that's kind of the thing that people roll with. And what are the cuffs?
Well, here's something, John, and that is, then so one comparison is elastic to rigid systems, and we just talked about that. And another comparison are inflatable systems versus otherwise elastic systems, like a bungee cord or whatever. And here, what using air does a couple things for you. One is air is easily compressible. So you have a very fine-tuned ability to get just the right amount of elasticity and just the right amount of control in the process. And most things like ACE wraps or whatever, they're elastic to a point, but then all of a sudden they're rigid when you get out to the as far as they can go. And so that's one of the nice things about the inflatable types is that there's always the same degree of elasticity and compressibility of the air sacs.
Yeah, I want to get into this a little bit more on this because the other thing is you can know and track exactly what the pressure is every time, where it's kind of just like a shot in the dark when people wrap and say, well, I think it feels right. I don't really know. But with the things like the Be Strong system, you can see exactly how much pressure I have in there.
You can go just to have a very reproducible amount of blood flow restriction each time you're doing it.
Where are the cuffs to be placed? And this is probably one of the number one questions I get personally is, how can a person find their personal sweet spot, the correct pressure?
So the first time someone's done this, they have no idea of what works. But over the years, we've developed recommendations of where to start for somebody. And the right pressure is very much tied to the size of the extremity. And so we have 5 different sizes of bands. And so that we have a recommended pressure to start with for your first workout with each size band. And then what happens is you go through your first workout and you register how much fatigue you're getting or not getting. And so, for example, on one end of the spectrum, you put the band at whatever the pressure was and you feel nothing different than if you'd just done the exercise themselves. That we say that's kind of getting no fatigue. And in that case, we recommend you up the pressure the next time you do the workout. And the other end of the spectrum is you get the things on and you can hardly do 2 or 3 reps. And you say, well, that's too much. And so you take it off and you start at a lower pressure. But in this way, you end up iterating into what is just the right pressure for you. And there also with our bands, there's a pretty wide range of pressures that work. So in practice, for example, for our standard armband, we're recommending 200 millimeters of mercury in the band to start. And someone will go through a workout, and if they're starting to get a pretty good fatigue signal in the third set, and they may have had a little fatigue in the second set, then that's probably a good pressure for them. But if they keep going to that 200 and they're getting stronger and better, then they won't be fatiguing anymore at that pressure. So you have an option of either raising the pressure, or maybe adding a fourth set of the exercise, or maybe instead of a 5-pound arm curl, you're doing an 8-pound arm curl. And so there's ways to make it harder. And the key to all of these things is getting that fatigue signal. Because once you get the fatigue signal, you're getting the systemic response, and you're getting those hormones flowing, which are going to amplify the workout, and off you go. So that's how we get there.
I love it. I love it. And again, people need to understand that this is not just an arm exercise or a leg exercise. That one of the things, if you could just reiterate for people, your chest is getting benefits even though they're placed on your arms. A lot of people are confused about that too. I get a lot of feedback like, well, what if I don't want bigger arms? What if I want to work my shoulders, or what if I want to work that? Can you explain how the whole body kind of benefits from this?
All right. So it gets back to that systemic response. So if you do an exercise that, like, let's say a bench press, where you're using your pecs and you're using your triceps, you're using a lot of muscles. Some of those muscles are proximal to the band. Some of them are distal to the band. But if you're getting those good fatigue feelings, that's sending that signal up into the brain, putting out the hormone release that's going everywhere. And any muscles that were involved in the exercise, pecs, for example, even though they didn't have their blood flows just fine, thank you, they're getting the benefit of this systemic hormonal response. And so we try to use exercises that do involve, even when you're doing standing up arm curls, you're also getting your core involved in trying to brace yourself for all that. So it's not just exercising the biceps when you're doing that.
Yeah, and what about people that are concerned with the safety of BFR? Can people with high blood pressure or other issues perform BFR? And maybe is it even beneficial possibly for people with those conditions?
Yeah, it's very beneficial, particularly beneficial. Here we need to distinguish between these rigid systems and elastic systems. So if you put a rigid system on, one of the things that it does is you get an exaggerated high blood pressure response to the exercises that you're doing. When you're using a Be Strong system, there's no further increase in blood pressure over that would happen with the exercise itself in the first place. So from a blood pressure standpoint, Be Strong is very safe, where the rigid systems are actually unsafe. Then other sorts of safety issues include occluding blood flow into the extremity. And Be Strong elastic systems do not impinge on the artery. They really are working on the venous side, where the rigid systems can compress and occlude the arteries. And then when we're talking about another kind of injury that can happen is nerve compression or a nerve injury. And there it's the same kind of thing. Our bands have been designed to minimize the chance of getting those kinds of things. With respect to nerve injuries, you can take something like a steel wire on one hand, or a big wide cuff on the other. So the width of these things is important. The wider it is, the more you distribute the load over a larger area, and that's okay to a certain extent. Where if it gets down to being like a wire, it basically cuts off and puts a pressure injury, a very high pressure injury, right on the nerve. But there's another aspect to this. So if with a nerve you have a wide area that has enough pressure to stop the flow, then that can also produce injury. So there's this middle width kind of thing that's just right. It's not too narrow so that it causes kind of a slicing injury, and it's not too wide to cause this widespread nerve injury. Um, but in general, where even the surgical tourniquet people think that their use should be supervised. That was one of the things that we tried very hard to work out with our Be Strong bands, is because we want the world to do that, to be able to do it, and not everybody's going to be able to have their own personal trainer around to supervise everything. Where with the tourniquet systems, you need a therapist or somebody who knows what they're doing to keep an eye on things. That not only does the equipment cost more, but having that service also costs something. So this was another one of our things to have Be Strong be the choice for home exercise or exercise on your own.
Can you speak? We already talked about weights, that we're talking 20 to 30% max of your maximum weight, but talk about repetition protocols, because you have to. This is a high rep thing, and can you kind of explain that to people and how they should not be intimidated, but kind of how to structure a workout around that?
Yeah, our general recommendation is 3 sets of 30 reps, which 90 reps of an exercise is a lot. But there's a little bit method to our madness here, and that is that what we want the working muscle to run out of oxygen and run out of some other things. And to do that, we need to keep it exercising and using up intracellular phosphates, or ATP, creatine phosphate. And so we need multiple reps to have it do that. And we also are using multiple reps so that we start, as the first recruited fibers drop out because they just don't have enough ATP to do it anymore. Then they recruit other fibers to pick up the slack, and so on. And before you know it, when you're getting out to these 90 reps, you're utilizing all motor units in the particular muscle. And that's when you're getting the good fatigue. That's when you're getting the good systemic response signal. And the main idea here is to exercise long enough to run out of things in the working muscle. So we don't want to be doing 100 meters or at least not as fast as the guys are doing them these days. Generally, exercise where a given set takes 45 seconds to a minute is about right. And then we leave the bands on, and in that rest interval, now all of a sudden they've lost the muscle pump. So the circulation, blood flow circulation, is actually decreased from what it was during the exercise. But because the bands are still in place, the flow is inadequate to replenish the working muscle. And so the muscle gets in further trouble, even though it's not doing any exercise. So it's kind of a pseudo recovery phase. And then you go into a second set, and that compounds the problem. And then the second recovery doesn't get it back, and then the third set really gets that feeling. So it's different people use different protocols. We like the 30-30-30. We say generally for an arm exercise, 3 exercises with 3 sets of 30 reps with 30 seconds rest in between. And that way we just get all these threes all in a row. But other people have used 30, 15, 15, 15, 4 sets, with the first one being 30 and then 15 for second, third, and fourth. So there's some flexibility in there, but I think the general principle is that you have to have a lot of reps going on. Mm-hmm. And you should have multiple sets where there's this kind of pseudo resting condition in between, where even though you're not doing any exercise, you're getting even less blood into the muscle and therefore not recovering.
Yeah, and can we talk about this too? Are there other applications for BFR, such as like active recovery, maybe on the rest day, going out for a walk with, the BFR bands, the Be Strong bands, or biking a little bit? Can you tell me a little bit
Absolutely.
about the benefits of that?
Yeah. So I really think of three kinds of Be Strong workouts. There's uh, kind of the calisthenics and light weights that are kind of the common thing. But then there's just good old endurance work, going for a walk, going for a hike, going for a bike ride with the bands on. And then there's a way to do this with kind of high intensity interval training, hit interval training, where you put the bands on and then you do something hard for 30 seconds to 60 seconds and then take a similar amount of rest. And you're pretty much done with your workout in 10 minutes, and you can't do much more than that. All those three general types of workouts are really great. And then in addition, we've had a lot of our athletes doing we call it kind of a recovery Be Strong workout in the evening, where they'll put the bands on and then just go through a stretching routine. And it's not really intended to be a training session, but just more or less stimulate, get a good flush going. It's almost like a massage. And at least they report that it makes them feel a lot better the next day.
Yeah, and what I love too is that, again, you talk about being able to do smart workouts on my off days or as a finisher. What I love is, we've all heard about extensive cardio, releases a lot of cortisol and all of these things. One of the great things is you can get literally a great cardio workout in 8 to 10 minutes by doing bike sprints. You're not going to get any impact on the body, but you put your Be Strong bands on, you start doing sprints. I'm talking about one with arms too, so you're getting a full body workout. Right. People can be done in 8 to 10 minutes. And again, You're not getting this big cortisol dump into your body. I mean, you really are cheating yourself if you're not using this product. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's so fantastic. Well, we have enjoyed this so much. I'd like you to talk just a little bit about where people can find out more about you, Be Strong, and I know you have some great certification and education programs coming up. Can you tell people how to get involved with that?
Probably the easiest thing to do is go to our website, bestrong.training. And the letter B, STRONG.training. And on there's a place where we generally have monthly 8-hour certification courses being offered. And there's also a lot of other information on the website. We try to have a pretty comprehensive FAQ file. There's various papers on the website. So that's what I'd ask people to do. Go to bestrong.training, and there's also a web store where they can get their Be Strong system if they want.
And people can get CEUs. If their trainers are out there, they can get CEUs for these courses too, right?
That's correct.
So I get on that.
Excuse me.
That's okay. I want to thank Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson for investing in all of our listeners today. Thank you so much for being on the show. I want to remind you about the special offer for all of our listeners today. You can get $75 off your order at Be Strong with the code JOHN75. That's JON75 until the end of February. I also want to thank our sponsors today, ZionMissionaryChurch.net, NeuroPowerSource.com, our podcast producer, Drew Kiespert, video director, Jolyn Thomas, head of talent relations, Mr. Fairfax Hackley. Be sure to rate us and subscribe to the Pressing Limits podcast and follow us on Instagram for the latest episodes. For more ways to watch and listen to this podcast, check out the Pressing Limits podcast website.